Today's episode of the DCAU Review is brought to you by Anchor by Spotify, the easiest way to make a podcast. When Liam and I first started the DCAU Review, we discovered a few different things. First of all, you had to have somewhere between Lex Luthor and Bruce Wayne level financial resources in order to be able to pay for a website to host your podcast. You also then had to have Richie Foley level intellect in order to figure out how to both edit and then get your podcast distributed onto Apple or Spotify. The great thing about Anchor by Spotify is that all of these things are available in one place. Everything you need to make a podcast is available all in one spot. Anchor has tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. And when hosting on Anchor, it makes it very easy to then distribute your podcast on listening platforms like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and many more. And the best thing about Anchor is it is totally free. So what are you waiting for? Download the Anchor app today or head over to anchor.fm and get started in creating your own podcast with Anchor by Spotify.
This is Will Friedle, the voice of the future Dark Knight, Batman Beyond, and you're listening to the DCAU Review hosted by Cal and Liam, streaming at DCAUreview.com and on your favorite podcast app. And remember a few things. First, Dana deserves better. And second, I am Batman.
In the year 2039, Gotham City has no heroes. Its people, no hope. Its youth, no future.
Evening, boys and girls. Who's up for some laughs?
Terry McGinnis was part of the problem.
Freeze right there. You can't control your temper, and you'd better if you expect to get anywhere in life.
Yeah, I'll be a big success, just like you.
Until a moment of violence brought him to the door of a man named Bruce Wayne.
Let's put a smile on his face.
Leave him alone. Once known as the Batman.
Man, you're something. You okay?
Now, the Dark Knight will rise again to drive the shadow of evil from the streets of Gotham. Let's go! Supervillains, beware! There's a new Batman in town. Batman Beyond. You're pretty strong for some clown who thinks he's Batman. I am Batman. Justice returns to Gotham. Welcome to my world.
Welcome, everybody, to episode 218 of the DCAU Review. I am one of your hosts, Cal. With me, my good friend, good brother, the man that runs our Twitter account. It's Liam. Liam, welcome to yet another edition of the DCAU Review as we continue in this month, our future month, as we've dubbed it. We got to come up with something catchier than that. I haven't completely workshopped it yet, but there has to be something catchier than future month.
We need something alliterative. I think that's the future. That's how we need to hashtag brand this going forward.
Yes, but we are continuing. As we mentioned last week at the end of our second ever coverage of the Zeta Project. By the way, thank you to anyone who listened to that episode. There wasn't a lot of you, but to those that did, we tip our hat to you, because we know that show has less of a following than pretty much any of the DCAU shows. So thank you to anybody who checked that out. But Liam, we are back in Gotham, or at least the future Gotham, this week with another episode of Batman Beyond.
That's right. We've got a pretty fun and I think a pretty memorable one among these. Season 2, or technically I guess that you could say this is season 3, because the second season has 26 episodes. So the latter half of the Batman Beyond slot of episodes here. Where's Terry on the docket today?
That's right. A memorable one for one of I think the title, it's a pretty unique title, not quite as good as Terry's Friend Dates a Robot, but still pretty good, because it forms a question and it immediately gives you a hint that this one's going to be a mystery that we have to solve. So before we get into today's mystery and discussing the plot, visual and animation, music, and voice acting, as we do each and every week, we will, of course, get the official IMDb Internet Movie Database synopsis for this week's episode, which originally aired on May the 27th, 2000. So we just passed the 22-year anniversary of this episode's debut. And of course, the IMDb synopsis segment is brought to you by The Pod Tower. Head over to youtube.com/The Pod Tower. And not only can you get our entire back catalog, including Terry's Friend Dates a Robot, back in the archives there, you can get all of our bonus episodes, both of our Zeta reviews, and so much more, plus additional content from our friends at the Watchtower Database and Tim Talk, available at youtube.com/The Pod Tower. Please subscribe.
Absolutely. And this is the synopsis for Where's Terry, which is written by Stan Berkowitz, directed by Kyung-Won Lim, with music by Lolita Ritmanis and animation by Coco and Dong Yang. And that synopsis reads as such. When Terry goes missing, Wayne and Max go searching for him.
Wayne? They didn't say Bruce? They just said Wayne?
Yep, they didn't have time. They were in a rush.
Oh, they left out some pertinent information. I mean, I guess it probably would have been okay if you, I don't know. I feel like it's an oversimplification. I don't like that one, especially because you refer to him as Wayne. No one ever refers to Bruce Wayne as Wayne. So
that gets the very next. Yeah, I was going to say the very next word is Max. So if you had said Bruce and Max, it's like, okay, we're using first names.
Right.
But to use one person's last name and the other person's first name, I feel like nah.
Yeah, that gets a D. No good on that one. Despite that synopsis kind of giving us the bird's eye view of what we have going on in this week's episode, we open things with Terry, Max, and Howard, the return of Howard, one of my favorite characters, our favorite characters in the entire Batman Beyond run, and Dana as well. Dana commenting, they're leaving a movie of some kind, I believe, and they're commenting that wouldn't you know, this is the first time that Terry's taken her out on an evening date in quite some time, and she remarks how that this is something that is pretty common in relationships, and Terry kindly reminds her that she's unfortunately she's dating a guy who has a nondescript job that requires him to help a very old man in the evening, apparently.
What'd you think of it, Howard?
Been there, done that.
He's talking about the movie, Howard, not the snack bar.
It was a nice change seeing you at night.
You're not gonna start that again, are you?
It's a very common practice going out at night, or so I've heard.
And you know why I can't always do it.
Yeah, I know. Your job. Hope it's worth it to you.
Most of the time it is, but not right now. See you tomorrow.
Which led me to just consider, what is it that Terry's friends think that Bruce does? I mean, that Terry does for Bruce. Like, what is it? What does his job entail that he's occupied all evenings?
It's a good question. In the pilot, he's described as a gopher for Bruce in front of Terry's mom, but I'm not sure. We don't really get a lot of detail beyond that. Like, he's not his bodyguard. He's not his secretary.
Yeah, it's kind of, I just thought that was kind of weird. It's like this just leads me to believe that Dana continues to struggle with self-esteem problems. Remember, #Dana deserves better.
That's right.
She deserves so much better than a boyfriend who isn't willing to share with her that he's Batman, but also is willing to continue being in a relationship with her and putting her through just terrible things and treating her terribly. So at this, they go their separate ways as he's actually off to go to his night job working for Mr. Wayne, and he heads down into the subway and notices a fella that looks a little suspicious. He's got a fedora on, he's got a trench coat pulled up around his eyes. So Terry begins to follow him in true Batman fashion. He decides he's gonna just take a look and see what's going on because he thinks something up. So he follows this guy down a few levels to the bottom tunnel, and as Terry wanders down that tunnel. A train passes him, but he continues wandering away, and that is where we cut to the next morning, and Terry's mom, along with Matt, are standing in his room, seemingly very concerned over the fact that Terry's bed has been made, and Terry is nowhere to be found. Terry's mom believes that to be far out of Terry's character, as he's not one known. He may be sneaking in and out before Terry's mom and Matt awaken, but he's definitely not making his bed. And then we cut to school, where Max and Dana are there, and Dana is also concerned. Max supposes that Terry might just be sick, and Dana is not convinced, as she said he seemed quite all right just a few hours before on their date. And then we cut to the cave, where Bruce himself is also very concerned, trying to radio Terry, I guess through the bat suit, and getting no response. And that's where we kind of get our opening stinger, as he gets up from the chair in the bat cave and begins to decide he's going to go look for Terry. And we get this cut into the subway, where we notice a suited Batman hand underneath some rocks, and Terry groaning, letting you know he's at least alive, but worse for wear, to say the least.
That's right. So we get sort of I hate to bring it up, but we get sort of an underdweller situation here. As yes, there's a little boy living underneath Gotham in
Dollar in the jar, by the way, and not letting you off that easy, but
fair enough. But yeah, he's we don't really know exactly what happened to Terry at first, other than that he's under this rubble. Alerts him that he knows his way around these tunnels, and that he will lead Batman out of here. And it's very clear that he's very mistrustful and does not idolize Bat.
What happened?
There was a cave-in, obviously.
I remember now. I must have been out for a long time. How am I going to explain it to?
To who?
Never mind.
What were you doing down here anyway?
I was following somebody. Somebody I thought I recognized. He spotted me, and then this happened. What are you doing down here?
Right now, I'm finding you the fastest way out. Got a problem with that?
And so he has no interest in helping him do anything other than find an exit. And of course, from there, we finally see who exactly that mysterious figure was that Terry was following. It is, of course, Shriek's little splicer sidekick, Ollie, who we actually met in the previous episode, Babel. And here he is telling Shriek that he's starting to think that Batman might still be alive, despite Shriek's attempts to kill him with, of course, his special sound waves. Although, because these underground tunnels and sewers in Gotham are such a maze, Shriek isn't able to actually find Batman directly. So instead, using some sort of sound machine, he tries to sort of pinpoint a general location, and then I guess cause a cave-in around Terry. And as it turns out, it actually does sort of work, as Batman is blasted by the sound waves, and there causes a little bit of a cave-in, and it seems like Terry and Dak have reached a little bit of a dead end, and they seemingly are trapped in a room. And that's kind of when we cut back to Bruce and Max, who are continuing their search, as Bruce is really not interested in teaming up with Max, so to speak. He's telling her to go home, and that he doesn't need her, and at the same time, she's very, very insistent that she needs to be there to help Terry, and that she's just as much a part of this as Bruce and Terry are. And as they kind of continue to have this discussion and look around, they happen to notice a group of the T Gang, who I think we've seen them at least once or twice already in this show. But
yeah, they were in the Joyride episode, if I recall.
There you go. Yep, I think you're absolutely right. And we see a group of T's walking through the subway, and one of them happens to have a backpack, which Max, of course, recognizes as Terry's, and that sets up like our little side adventure here as Bruce and Max follow them to their hideout, and Bruce kind of tries to play it cool and offers to pay in exchange for this backpack. But of course, the T's are very suspicious as to why a random old man would follow them all the way to their hideout just to get a backpack.
What do you want? A backpack. This look like a store to you? I'll pay a fair price. A very fair price. Anybody got a backpack they want to sell?
Who wants to know?
Some old guy.
You were in the subway, weren't you?
Yes, that's where I saw your backpack.
And you followed me all the way here because you just had to have it.
Something like that.
You really want it, don't you? How about 10? No, 20 credits.
Deal. But I want to know where you got it. How about for 30?
Now, tell me why you really want this old thing.
As they sort of all jump Bruce at once, things are looking not great. But then, of course, Max arrives to kind of alleviate the situation a little bit. And by alleviate, I mean she maces two of them. And that sort of gets a couple of the other ones who are holding Bruce down to run at her, which allows Bruce to get back into the fight and dust off a couple old moves. And they're able to, with some help from Bruce's patented enhanced interrogation tactics, they find an answer of where exactly this T gang found the backpack, and they're heading back to the sewer system, or to the subway system now.
That's right. And Bruce again is not very complimentary of Max, despite the fact that she helped him out of a jam. He's still insisting that she go home, and she again reminds him constantly that she's helped out quite a bit and that she belongs here and wants to help. So she follows Bruce down to the sewers, and we actually get cut back to Dak and to Terry. Well, Batman, who are, again, as you mentioned, stuck in this room, and Terry is sort of checking out the different walls and notices that one wall has some condensation on it and some wear on it. And he suggests maybe blowing a hole in that wall, but Dak informs him that the Gotham River runs through all of the tunnels, and if they blast a hole in that wall, they're likely to die in a lot quicker than they currently are, as opposed to the slow death that they are destined for at this point. And as Terry learns a little bit more about Dak's backstory and how he got down there and his general outlook on life, as you mentioned, he mentions not idolizing Batman like the other members of his class, but actually idolizing, he mentions Blight and Spellbinder and the Royal Flush Gang by name as people he idolized over Batman, just because of the freedom that they had and whatever they went out and got, they took.
Back at school, half the kids want to be you.
Yeah?
I was in the other half.
Who do you want to be?
Maybe Blight or Spellbinder, or somebody in the Royal Flush Gang.
Are you serious?
Hey, they did what they wanted and wouldn't let anyone tell them what to do.
But look how they ended up.
Yeah, thanks to you. And I'm gonna end up that way too now, thanks to you.
Do that again. Same spot. It sounds different here.
So Batman definitely taken aback a little bit, but as he's telling this his perspective on whom he favors, Dak is throwing some rocks and hits what sounds like a hollow wall. So Batman uses his many explosives, as he tells Dak just a few moments before, to attempt to blow a hole in that wall because it sounds hollow. When the explosive go off, though, it's revealed that it's just one of the support beams, and the sound that he heard was the hollow sound of the support beam making a noise. But in the blast, part of the ceiling actually begins to break away, and there's a hole big enough that allows Dak to escape. Meanwhile, during this whole time, Shriek and Ollie are somewhere else in the tunnels, and Ollie is almost certain that Batman has survived all of their encounters thus far, and Shriek reminds him to keep a look on the scanner to see if he's able to detect any additional lives. So I guess the scanner goes off again and alerts them that there's additional presence in that area. So meeting Dak as he climbs out of the hole is none other than Shriek himself. So Shriek takes him captive, and Dak slips up through his conversation with Shriek and lets Shriek know that he knows exactly where he is. So Shriek demands that he take him to where Batman is. Meanwhile, Bruce and Max are back down in the subway tunnels, and they come upon where the original tunnel where Terry had gone down, and there's some construction work going on. So Bruce recognizes that at this point it's a dead end, and he tells Max once again to go home. But then as they see the construction workers, Bruce decides that, hey, actually, Max, I do think that you can help. And Max buys it hook, line, and sinker that she's going to be the one to go find Terry as Bruce distracts the construction workers. And just one of the funniest moments ever. So Bruce goes over to the construction workers and begins chatting them up. And as Max is sneaking down the opposite way, Bruce points out that Max probably shouldn't be there to the construction workers, which causes them to run after her. And in fact, Bruce has done the old switcheroo.
Working late, fellas?
Our seismograph picked up something down there. Maybe a cave-in.
Ooh, a cave-in. Sounds dangerous.
Might be.
Speaking of dangerous, should that young lady be down there?
Hey, you! What are you doing? This is dangerous down here! Hey, go together!
That old man told me to do it. You should arrest him, too. He's right over there.
And he has used Max as the distraction, which allows him to be able to sneak down further into the tunnel. So as Max is hauled away, she blames Bruce for it and says that old man told her to do it. But as they turn around, of course, Bruce has once again performed one of his daring disappearing acts and is nowhere to be found. Still got it, as they say. So, and this kind of leads us to the culmination of our episode as Dak leads Shriek and Ollie to where he says that Batman is, and he points it to a wall and says, yep, Batman is right behind that wall. But in the words of the great Admiral Akbar, it's a trap.
That's right. It's Chekhov's condensation covered wall. And, earlier in the episode, it was pointed out, as you mentioned, that if they blew a hole in that wall, it would create a flood from the nearby Gotham River, which runs all around these tunnels. And here it is, the water rushes in and takes Shriek out. It does allow Batman some time to sort of regroup here, but it also sweeps up Dak in the flood as well. So as Batman's able to get away, he's sort of looking around in the tunnels, has to kind of listen for where Dak's voice is coming from, and is finally able to locate him right as he's, of course, perilously hanging off the side of some kind of sewer drain that looks like a very steep drop. And of course, Terry saves him just in time, and as he attaches the bat rope and swings back down and gets him. And then as Shriek is still there and is once again ready to attack. Thankfully, Bruce has arrived and quickly dispatches of Shriek with his cane once again. And we move on from there to our little postscript to this episode. We see Terry and Bruce on a nearby rooftop looking down as Shriek and Ollie are loaded into a police cruiser, as well as Dak, who Terry mentions told Batman that he would be going home after all of this craziness. He'd be going home to his parents, and that he had actually been so emotional that he shed tears over it. And Terry asks Bruce about Max and if she was aware of any of this, and Bruce kind of seemingly is starting to compliment her and talks about how he spent most of the evening with her. And then once again, it's a great setup to a pretty good punchline. Right as Bruce is talking about how well they work together, it cuts down to Max still being led away by the police.
Does Max have any idea what happened?
As a matter of fact, I spent most of the evening with her.
Really? Then the two of you must have finally come to an understanding.
You could say that.
You can't do this to me! It's not fair! I'll sue!
As she's still dealing with the aftermath of Bruce having sold her out to the construction workers there. And then we get one final little bit there as Terry returns home and goes to get in bed right as his mother walks in, and she believes that he's actually making his bed, not about to get into it, and that kind of puts her mind at ease, as she now believes that actually he was just getting up early and leaving before she saw him, but that he's just become a more responsible boy, and now he's going to make his bed every day. And so we kind of we get a nice little we're tying up all the loose ends. We don't really see how he explains it to Dana. But he
doesn't do that. He just gaslights her more, or lies to her, or
he lies.
Just doesn't bother explaining at all. She's just supposed to.
He tells her she's being crazy,
right? Exactly.
For even asking. So we don't get to see that part of his explanation, but yes, we have tied up our loose ends. Our villain is captured. Our young runaway has returned home, and Terry's mom's mind has been put at ease. So that's where we wrap things up for this week.
That's right. So I guess we can chat about the plot here. For whatever reason, I remembered the aspect of Bruce and Max working together on this episode, but I had blocked out the part that was like the weird Underdwellers kid. Dollar in the bad episode. It's even at this point. We both mentioned it one time, so it's a wash. It's a push. But I had blocked that part of the episode out. So in a way, it does feel a little bit kiddie. It feels a little bit juvenile. The kid has to save the day. The way they go about it, I think, is fine. I think that it doesn't make Batman look like too much of a buffoon. It makes sense that he thought that he wasn't familiar with the area. He thought that using all of his explosives at one time was the best case scenario to get through this wall. And then ended up needing Dak's help to ultimately escape. And ultimately Dak needs to be rescued in the end. I think the real fun is definitely the Bruce and Max bit, and certainly seeing Bruce interact with, even an older Bruce interact with the T gang and up to his old tricks. And as you mentioned, his interrogation skills, while not on display because it's done off screen, certainly intimated that he hasn't lost a step with that. And then of course the disappearing act that he does with the construction crew is great too. And the trick of using Max, tricking Max into thinking that she's going to be the one to ultimately save Terry, and Bruce is the one that ends up using her instead. I just love that. But so I think it's good. I think it's fun. I think there are a couple of things I feel like, we've talked about a couple of times the things that this show didn't quite accurately predict as what the future would be. And I feel like even in the late 90s, there were closed circuit televisions in mass transit stations. Mm-hmm. So rather than the T gang just happening to walk by in the moment that Bruce and Max had been standing there, which makes this whole sequence happen because of happenstance. Everything happens for the rest of the show because of happenstance at that point, because if they hadn't seen that backpack, they would have been kind of up the river. Also, I know that at one point Dak mentions there's no radio in or out of the tunnels, which again, that makes sense. That seems to be pretty real. But wasn't there at some point a vid link between the Batcave and the Batsuit also? Where it doesn't, like, Bruce tries to radio into Terry, but there was no mention of like, hey, the vid link is also down, because Terry's wearing the suit, and that's something that was used in the early season. So it felt like, I don't know, maybe he did it and it was just off screen. But there's a couple things there. If they had checked the CCTV and seen, the T gang walking around with a backpack there, maybe that would have been a little less like, oh, this is all this happened because of happenstance for me. But that's a little bit nitpicky. But I think overall it's a fun episode. Sadly, this is the last episode that we get with Shriek, and he kind of goes out on a less than stellar note as he gets his bell rung literally by 80-year-old Bruce Wayne, who hits him in the head with a cane a couple times. which feels like a downer ending for one of Terry's main baddies for the series. But yeah, I still think it's a fun episode. I ended up giving a 7 out of 10. What about you?
Yeah, I ended up giving it the exact same score of 7 out of 10. I think it's a fun concept, and I definitely think, like you said, there's a lot of fun to be gleaned from the old Bruce and Max having to go out into the field when that's not really either of their fortes anymore for different reasons. I think that's kind of a fun sequence, and then yeah, the idea of Shriek just being holed up and using sound waves to try to pinpoint Batman's location, like that's kind of cool and like an interesting use, because otherwise, like, this really could have been like any villain. Like, it didn't really need to be Shriek. It didn't really need to be Shriek. It feels like it could have been anyone, because it's not the other that featured this character had like very specific Shriek related plots. And this one, it just feels like this. It feels like a lot of the Penguin episodes of the original animated series, where it's not really built around him so much as it is around just whatever happens, and then we need a villain to fight at the end, and we picked Shriek for it. So yeah, at least like giving him that weird sound device where he's got like sonar and he's trying to track Batman by the explosions and by the voices they hear in this maze of tunnels. That's at least kind of fun and kind of a unique idea for that. So I appreciated that. And then yeah, as the ending of Bruce coming in at the last minute to save Terry, I think is kind of a fun bit. And yeah, like we already talked about, the comedy that comes from Bruce and Max together, I think is a good deal of fun as well. So yeah, not a complete home run, but yeah, a lot of fun throughout this 22 minutes.
All right, Liam. Well, that will bring us to our next category, which is going to be animation and visuals. And I believe, did you say Stan Berkowitz was responsible for this week?
He wrote it.
Okay.
We have I believe his name is Kyung-Wan Lim is the director, and then we have Coco and Dong Yang responsible for our animation.
So, Liam, I guess I'll kick us off here. I will be honest and say that I thought that the visuals were probably the weakest of the things this week, simply just from a story standpoint, because it is a lot of standing around. There's not a lot of action. We don't see the initial cave-in that knocks Terry out, or Batman out rather. So we don't get the drama for that, and it's a lot of dialogue heavy interaction. As I mentioned, we get a little bit of action with Bruce and the T gang as they begin to gang up on him, and even that is sort of undermined by Max's use of mace, and then we get the Bruce's interrogation happening off screen. So there's not really a big fight that happens. There's not a lot of action that occurs. So most of the visuals rely on just the interaction between the characters, which everybody looked on model. Everybody looked fine. There was one sequence that stood out to me, and that's the initial time that Ollie points out to Shriek that there's at least somebody alive in one of the tunnels. And we get this really neat follow of Shriek's sound blast. It sort of tunnels kind of like the like Bugs Bunny did in the old Warner Brothers cartoons, but you follow it, kind of goes up and around a wall as Shriek is attempting to sort of pinpoint just where these people are within the tunnels. But that sequence I loved, because you follow it goes through the tunnel up and around and kind of creates the spiral. And I thought that was really unique, and that kind of gave me hope that this was going to be a bit more exciting on the visual side of things. We do get Shriek's powers again used when Dak tricks him into using his sound waves up against the wall that ultimately sort of melts, and you start to see the water break through. So I did like that. That was a neat trick. But the rest of the episode, I didn't have a whole lot of visual notes other than Howard being in the opening scene. That was a plus. always cheer for him being there. But here's another one. I might be taking all of them if you don't have more, but we get the return of the Bat Rebreather as Terry is submerged underwater. Once Shriek is tricked into blasting through the wall, the room where Terry is stuck in begins to fill up with water, and as Terry is submerged, the Bat Rebreather comes out from back behind his neck, I guess, and he wears it until he's able to escape the room, and then it once again disappears. But that was neat to see that attachment come out. But yeah, other than that, I didn't have a ton of notes for visuals. I don't think there's anything bad. I don't think there's anything wrong with this episode. But other than the sequence with Shriek's powers, there wasn't much that stood out. So I settled on a 6 out of 10 for visuals and animation this week.
Yeah, I don't have a ton to add as well. I also gave it a 6 out of 10. I think that sequence you mentioned where Shriek does the sound blast and it goes through sort of the rubble and then creates the cave-in is exciting. The actual flooding itself of that sequence when he blasts the hole in the wall, it's against the river, I think is pretty intense. And as you see the water kind of quickly rush into the room and then rise up, I think it's a pretty good sequence. And then Terry jumping off the side of the drain or whatever it is and throwing the bat rope behind him and it wrapping around the pipe and then him sort of catching Dak and then slowly climbing back up. I think that's a fun visual bit. And then other than that, there really isn't a lot of traditional action other than you mentioned that Bruce and Max have their dust up with the teas briefly, but other than that, there really isn't a lot of traditional action or fisticuffs to be had in this episode. So yeah, there's nothing particularly wrong with any of it, but it's not a heavy action episode. And again, I think both previous Shriek episodes had such unique fight scenes and battle scenes and some of the tech. And the other thing is because it's all set in this subway system and these tunnels, like it's very no offense, like it looks good for what it should be, but it's a bunch of gray walls and pipes and you get a little bit of like in Shriek and Ollie's little hideout, like they have the tech, like you mentioned, the sound machine, the radar machine, and whatever else. So there's a little bit, or sonar I should say. There's like a little bit of cool stuff there, but as far as the background, the overall look of the episode, it's a pretty drab episode from a color palette standpoint. Like we said, it's a lot of grays, and they go to the teas little hideout, and it's a lot of like browns and everything. The tea designs, I mean, I'm sure we talked about them way back when we did the previous episode. But yeah, like I like those designs. Those are wacky characters. I like the idea that there's more than one gang in Gotham City at this point. So I the white skin with the big red T across their face is a fun visual design. But yeah, overall it's a pretty, I thought, and again, this isn't necessarily the fault of anyone because that's what the story called for, but it's not a particularly visually exciting episode. It's a little bit bland, but as far as the action we do get, like I said, I think that sequence where the water fills up and the rebreather comes out and then Terry fires off his rockets and zips up through the little hole in the ceiling and bursts out of the water and then goes and saves the day, that's certainly a lot of fun, but that's kind of the big visual highlight as far as like a big action sequence goes.
Sure, absolutely. Did you I don't know, I think remembering my mindset back in 2000 is hard because I can't even remember what I ate for lunch yesterday, but I seem to think that like there was always this expectation from us as kids when we're watching it is like, all right, we've got Batman Beyond. Is there going to be a Robin Beyond? And they kind of like, this kind of gives you, obviously we know there was never, despite there being action figures and comic book tie-ins or not tie-ins, but comic books that sort of fulfill that end of things. We didn't ever get on the actual series a Robin for this Batman, but this sort of kind of fills that role a little bit in what would happen if Terry had his own version of Robin. And I even noticed in the way that they at least drew Dak's hair, he does have like the spiky hair with like the little cowlick in the back, similar to the way that Dick Grayson's hair looked as Robin in and even Tim Drake's a little bit in the new Batman Adventures. So I don't know if that was intentional or if that was just we're drawing a kid with messy hair, but it feels like it can't be too much of a coincidence that they gave him spiky hair and he's kind of fulfilling the role of the Robin of a kid sidekick in part of this, at least part of the episode here. But I did want to mention that, although he also is just black and gray. Nothing. This episode called for a lot of black and grays, so nothing spectacular about his look per se either. But I did dig his gray Ugg boots; those were kind of cool. All right, Liam, let's move on to our next category, which is going to be music. And I believe you said this week was 1/3 of our dynamic music partners, Miss Lolita Ritmanis, responsible for this week's music. Anything stand out for you in the way of music is concerned?
The biggest musical highlight for me is probably that the Bruce talking to the T's sequence. I think there's kind of this really soft sort of almost kind of eerie music with a little bit of synthesizer. They almost bring in like the refrain. I think it's piano. It might be some kind of string, but where it's sort of played very calmly. And then as the situation sort of escalates, then you get the electric guitar brought in, and you get some of the synthesizer a little bit louder and more dramatically as that situation kind of escalates and Max comes in and everything like that. So I thought that was pretty. I thought that was kind of a nice sequence, and then my only other note was the end sequence again with the flood. I think that's got some good kind of traditional Batman Beyond exciting action music behind it. But those were kind of my two big musical notes, or I should say, really the only two moments where I really took direct notice of the music for the episode.
Yeah, I will say that this episode with Miss Ritmanis having the composition for this episode was definitely more orchestral heavy, a lot less rock and roll, a lot less guitar heavy than we're used to. I did think that set the mood, at least at the beginning, where they're kind of flashing between Terry's loved ones, showing concern, including Bruce. There's a little bit of orchestral synthesizer beneath all of those scenes, so it's a little bit lighter. It's certainly not the heavy rock that we're used to from this series, or that you might think of when you're thinking about Batman Beyond. But I did notice that the Bruce versus the T Gang as well, as you mentioned, that certainly had a bit of a flair to it. And then later on, as Terry blasts out of the water, there was some more music there. I will say, I think the music is fine. I will say there seemed to be a missed opportunity, especially of how much action that Bruce faces in this week's episode, to have a little bit of the classic Shirley Walker Batman theme play at some point, whether it's after he's helped defeat the T Gang, or when he does his disappearing act, something that would have just kind of added that extra little flourish. I feel like maybe would have brought my score up a little bit more than it was. But then the music at the end, as Terry and Bruce recap the episode, and as Max is being led away, I thought that it's played very light and airy with a little bit of drums behind it. I dug that because it added. It's not quite like Joker's Favor humor goofiness, but it's definitely not the dark tone that most of the episode had, or at least that we started with at the beginning of the episode. So I did dig that. For all those reasons, I ended up giving music a solid 7 out of 10. What about you?
Yeah, I went just 1 point lower. I gave it 6 out of 10. Yeah, I definitely think there's some cool moments. I think that initial bit where Terry's sort of tailing Ollie in the subway system. There's kind of some good kind of eerie chase music going on there in that sequence as well. So yeah, it's not just the as you said, especially for a Batman Beyond episode, it's not just the kind of quiet synthesizers in the talking scenes and the drum machine kind of percussion driven action guitars. There's a little bit of a unique flavor to this one.
All right, Liam, let's move on to our final category of the week, which is going to be, as always, our voice acting. So with our voice acting, not a huge cast here because we don't have a lot of characters, and we have at least one familiar voice playing at least 2 characters, maybe 3 characters. But let's talk about this week's voice cast, shall we?
Absolutely. So, briefly, we do have Max Brooks returning as Howard. We have Terry Garr as Terry's mom. We have Ryan O'Donoghue as Matt, and of course Lauren Tom as Dana. All of them get very brief appearances, but worth noting there. And then our accomplice to our supervillain Ollie, as we mentioned, already used in one previous episode, but he's this kind of skeevy splicer guy. He doesn't get much to do in this episode, but we do have, of course, a guy we've talked about a lot lately and will continue to talk about a lot because he's in all these shows, is great Michael Rosenbaum, who just celebrated his 50th birthday last week, which, what is that guy? What is in the water that guy drinks? What a beautiful man he is for 50.
Absolutely. Doesn't look a day over 30. But good for that.
Absolutely not. But yes, we have him playing Ollie, and he plays at least one, possibly 2 of the team members as well. So he gets a lot to do, and a lot of again, he doesn't really have a lot to sink his teeth into. But of course, if he's in your cast, he's going to play at least probably 2 or 3 characters most of the time.
Absolutely. Yeah. It was again, it's a voice that you recognize. It just feels at home. Like you just feel at home when he's talking, and you don't even notice that he's playing 3 different characters. I mean, you do, but it doesn't even bother you that he's playing 3 different characters. It's just like, there goes Michael Rosenbaum. Of course he's playing a member of the T gang. Oh, he's playing 2 members of the T gang. Of course he is. Yeah. And he does it well.
Yeah, absolutely. We have Chris Mulkey returning as Shriek once again. Kind of like we talked about in our plot and our visuals. Shriek doesn't get much to do here, so he doesn't, other than the exposition of him explaining how his new sound technology works, and then kind of some brief taunting of Batman at the end. Not as much to do for him and as he did in either of the previous episodes, which is just a shame because I seem to remember enjoying his work in the previous episodes, but still good to have him back, and always good to dust off one of these classic Beyond rogues, for even if it's only for kind of a briefer appearance here.
Yeah, he's fine. As you said, not a lot to do, no standout moments, except maybe when Terry does finally rescue old Darius Arthur Kelman, as he's known as, better known as Dak. After he rescues him, Shriek is right there and sort of delivers a sinister line before getting his bell rung by Bruce Wayne. But I think he's fine. Again, not a lot asked of him, but he fills the role nicely.
Absolutely. And then we have, speaking of Darius himself, we have Eli Maranthal playing that role, and maybe not a name you would recognize by the name, but you would definitely recognize a couple of roles he's had within the DCAU. He actually comes back a little bit later on to play Robin in the Mystery of the Batwoman movie.
I thought so. Mm-hmm.
And then, but more importantly, perhaps if you are a larger fan of great animated movies, one of the greatest animated movies, I would say, of the last 30 years at least, he was Hogarth in The Iron Giant.
Hogarth Hughes, get out of here.
That's right. So very fun to see that because it was one of those things where I recognized the voice when I heard it, but I couldn't quite pinpoint where it was. And then when I looked up and saw that it was Mr. Maranthal, I was like, I'm pretty sure that's Hogarth. And then later on he became Robin when he was more of a young man at that point. But yes, it's that's a movie I know that's very, very near and dear to both of our hearts, and fun to have him in an episode, if only as a trivia note. But I think he does a pretty good job playing off of Batman. He has this real world weary kind of mysterious thing. He has this one scene where he, and of course playing off Will Friedle as Batman, is talking about how he, all the other kids at school idolize him, but he idolizes, who does he name drop? He name drops Blight, the Royal Flush Gang, and
Spellbinder.
Spellbinder as his idols, as people he'd like to be more like. And Will Friedle there gets to kind of shoot back at him at one point when Dak's a little bit worried about Batman using these explosive. He asks him if would Blight, you think Blight would worry about that or something like that. I thought they played off each other really well, and you get that sense of, it starts out almost as kind of pure antagonistic, and then kind of softens throughout the episode as this kid, who has this sort of view of the world already at such a young age that nobody cares about him and nobody cares about each other, and then he sees Batman actually willing to sacrifice his own life, and he in turn chooses to help try to save Batman's life by kind of double crossing Shriek there. I think he does a good job, and certainly getting to play off such a seasoned and incredible voice actor as Will Friedle probably didn't hurt either.
Yeah, both of them. He's a fine child actor, and as you mentioned, his role in Iron Giant is legendary in a lot of cult fans of that cult classic, The Iron Giant. If you haven't seen it, I'm sure it's streaming on the wonderful HBO Max app or one of the other apps out there. It's a good one to check out. Fun for the whole family. Even has some DC Comics references in it. So if you haven't seen it, it's a masterpiece. But he does a great job. And as you mentioned, I think they play off each other very well. And this is an episode where Will Friedle gets to show that he kind of is the older person role, I guess, the mentor role in this case that we're used to seeing him kind of play off Kevin Conroy with. So I do appreciate that he kind of gets to be the adult in the room, pun intended, for most of the episode, and plays off of him very well. So yeah, I think a great showcase for both actors in this episode.
Absolutely. And then speaking of actors who get to really play off of each other and have a lot of fun, we have our two other main players of this week's episode. We have, of course, the legend that is Kevin Conroy playing the older Bruce Wayne, but we also have Cree Summer, who's in a lot of these episodes but doesn't always get a lot to do other than have someone besides Bruce for Terry to talk to. And then this week, seeing not only is she kind of an active part of the action and of the kind of the overall story, but also pairing that we've never seen her directly paired with her bouncing off Bruce. That's a heck of a pairing. I think Cree Summer and Kevin Conroy together are just so much fun in this episode. As we mentioned, both them kind of sniping at each other, and him trying to kind of do the classic Batman mean mug, the bat glare at her, and her just being so full of spunk that she refuses to back down even from this creepy old man that's yelling at her to go home, and then ultimately him kind of pulling the old switcheroo where you feel like he's giving her the nod of approval, only to find out that he was just using her to distract the security guards. I think that's a lot of fun. I did not remember that there was really like a comedic element to this. I only really remembered them sort of arguing with each other at the beginning, back and forth. So that those little comedic bits that they throw in right to the end there, where Bruce is kind of giving her a compliment and talking about how well she held her own, and then you cut to her being led away by the police at the end. Not surprisingly, because of their both actors' pedigree with this sort of voice acting work, I suppose. But yeah, Kevin Conroy and Cree Summer, really fun dynamic together that we've never really gotten to experience before.
Yeah, it's a shame. I don't remember how many, if any, additional instances we get to see of these two paired up, but boy, what a lot of fun. And I think, we heap enough praise on Mr. Conroy, for every performance that and deservedly so, for every performance that he comes through on. But man, for Miss Summer to be able to hold her own and to, as you mentioned, to come out and not sound intimidated and not sound like a rookie or like subpar compared to Kevin Conroy, man, it speaks to her level of talent as well. And just, what a fantastic voice actress that she is and how talented that she is. So not every day that you can go toe to toe with Bruce, and certainly in these in an almost antagonistic style, and come out feeling like it that she kind of held her own, in that, Max, as a teenager in this setting, against, the well grizzled old Batman, and it didn't induce eye rolling. It's like, oh, well, they're just making it because it's, they're pushing it because they need to make the teenagers seem cool enough to stand up to Batman, or the old Batman. It's like, no, her performance is like, oh, she can kind of hold her own. But then again, at the end, having the switcheroo and Bruce come out on top, I thought, and just the dynamic between Miss Summer and Mr. Conroy, man, they gelled really well together. So I can't remember if there are any additional interactions between the two of them in the series, but here's hoping that we get at least one or two more.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, it's as we talk about quite often on this show, it's hard to find new or interesting or creative ways to talk about Kevin Conroy's voice performances because of the consistent quality. So if it's not like a big landmark episode or something specific that we can talk about, it can feel like we're repeating ourselves a lot. So to just see this completely unique dynamic thrown in, especially for this version of Bruce Wayne, to deal with Cree Summers Max here, it's just a lot of fun, and I think created a really unique environment for this week's episode. If anything, like I think we definitely hope there is more of this in the series, and if not, that's a bit of a shame. But I ended up settling on a pretty strong 8 out of 10 for my voice acting score.
Nice. I went one tick higher. I ended up giving a 9 out of 10. I think everybody performed pretty well, and both of our scores coming out pretty high there really reflect that.
Absolutely.
All right, Liam. Well, totaling everything up as we come to the end of our episode here, I end up with a not quite 30, 29 out of 40. What about you?
No, I am just 2 points lower at 27 out of 40. So yeah, not a big difference there for us. As we can kind of start talking about rewatchability. Like I think like for all the reasons we just talked about, especially in voice acting, I think there is a unique quality. I think it's a fun episode of this series. It does have a recurring villain, the last appearance of Shriek, at least in this series. So I would be hard pressed to say that this is a must-watch episode, unless we come to find that there's a lot more Max and Bruce interactions after this that we've somehow forgotten. But as of now, I wouldn't say this is really a must-watch for the series or for the overall universe as a whole.
No, and I think that the last episode of the Shriek that featured Shriek was a little bit better of a bow for his character. In fact, I think at the time when we reviewed that episode, I had forgotten that he was featured in this episode. That's how forgettable his part in this episode is. He just kind of seems like a guy that they stuffed in here. It could have been anybody that was responsible for Terry's disappearance, and they were just like, yeah, put him in there. So yeah, I wouldn't classify this as a must watch. Would I recommend it as a fun 22 minutes? Sure, absolutely. I think the Bruce and Max dynamic, and certainly it's one of the few episodes that I feel like Bruce is one of the featured, especially in the later seasons here. Bruce is one of the featured characters. So I would definitely recommend it if you're looking for a fun Bruce episode, if you're looking to see a wacky pairing. then certainly this is your go-to for that. But yeah, I don't think this is a must-watch by any means, and probably would have been better served the Shriek character to not appear at all. But you know, what are you gonna do?
Absolutely.
All right. Exactly. All right, Liam. Well, that will begin to wrap us up for this week. Thank you, everybody, for checking out this week's episode. Don't forget, we would love your love and support for our podcast. You can do that a few different ways. If you're looking to do it the cheapest and freest way possible, you can do so by leaving reviews on your favorite podcast app. So if you listen on Apple Podcast or Spotify, leave us a 5-star review. And if you're on Apple, leave us a little blurb, tell people what you like about the show. You can also not only leave those reviews, but subscribe to us on your favorite podcast app. You can also head over to youtube.com/thepodtower, and you can not only subscribe to that channel there, but when we post our videos, you can like those as we post our videos each week. You can also follow us on social media at DCAU Review, both on Twitter and Instagram. Lots of interaction happening on both of those fan platforms, so you can hit us up there. On Spotify also, you have weekly polls and weekly exclusive questions that we ask. So if you listen to us on Spotify, click through the episode and you can kind of find those polls there. Also, if you're looking to support us and with your hard-earned dollars, we greatly appreciate everybody that does so. You can check out the link at the bottom of the episode. Head over to anchor.fm if you want to, our anchor.fm site, and check there. There's a link there. Or you can head over to DCAUreview.com, and you can also check out our store there. We got shirts and stickers and mugs. So if you want to throw a couple dollars our way, we would greatly appreciate it. And thank everybody that does and has done so. Liam, that's not proper English, but moving on. Liam, speaking of moving on, we are continuing here with one last week.
That is right, Cal, and we will be reviewing just the next episode in order. We kind of touched on this a couple of weeks ago, but because we, perhaps like some of our listeners, are experiencing the Zeta Project for the very first time, we don't really have any ideas on special themes we can do the way we have with Superman or Justice League in the past. So we're just going to review this show in order, and we'll be picking up with season 1, episode 3, which was Remote Control. I should note that we're going by the air date order and not the episode order. So if you noted that that's not actually the 3rd episode, you're not wrong, but we're gonna be doing it in air date order. So Remote Control coming up next week.
Can't wait. Going to be a great way to end our future reviews for the month, and one additional Saturday in the month, of course. So we'll be reviewing next week what we'll be covering in our 5th week. But until then, I'm Cal.
And I'm Liam.
And we'll talk to you on the next episode of the DCAU Review.
Adios.